Now, the political crisis in Niger is not ending anytime soon, with ECOWAS and the military junta split on how to restore democracy there. Over the weekend, an ECOWAS delegation led by former Chief of Defense Staff of Nigeria, Abdul Salam Abubakar, met with the leadership of the military junta and even had discussions with President Bazoum, but they fell short of the ECOWAS demands and immediate restoration of constitutional rule. We have analysis of this for you shortly. Right now, though, let's look at how ECOWAS has dealt with previous coups. If you look at it, we've had 84 coup attempts since 1990 in the sub-region. It has had 50% success rate. That means 43 of it have been successful since 1990. Now, if you look at between 1990 and now, or if you're looking at, say, 1990 and 1999, there were 26 coups. So within a period of 9 years, there were 26 coups in the sub-region. Now, out of that, and again, between 2000 and 2009, another 9-year period, we had 13 coups in the sub-region. Now, let's look a bit more further. We've had between 2010 and 2019, so that's also a period of 9 years, we've had 39. Between 2020 and July 2023, a period of 3 years, we've had 9 coups in Africa, and that's staggering, really. So it means that there are 3 coups every year between 2020 and 2023, July. We've not even ended 2023, but these are the number of coups we have in Africa. So these paint a quite disturbing picture of military takeovers on the continent of Africa. On Friday, ECOWAS defense chiefs concluded their meeting in Accra and signaled their readiness for military action.
It is beyond even our expectation. All the member states have committed, something very concretely, all of them. And yesterday, we had the arrival also of Guinea-Bissau, to join us.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. So everybody is here and everybody has committed something, for the mission. So we are very pleased with it. Yeah. But like I said, this is a plan B. Okay? We are ready, but we still give peace a chance. We want them to come forward with very concrete sort of proposal for a peaceful resolution of the crisis. Yeah, and that begins by them receiving a mission from ECOWAS. We have not arrived at a date to deploy the force, and I'm not going to speculate on it. That is not our decision, right? These are the military chiefs of the region who are meeting. You see, when you are going into a military operation, there are plan B, plan A, plan C, and others, and you choose the scenario depending upon development. So I cannot tell you that we've chosen a day that is an ambiguity we'll always keep.
So we asked the question this afternoon: will the military operation happen? How should the discussions be, knowing that President Bazoum is still under detention? Joining us now is Mukhtar Momoni. He is a security analyst and has been following this matter keenly. Mukhtar, grateful for you to join us here. We're also expecting later on to be joined by Ismail Hrover, who is an international relations analyst. Now, Mukhtar, you have studied this particular issue for quite some time. Over the weekend, ECOWAS and the Niger junta met. It looks like all of us are far apart. The junta says I will return the country to democracy within 3 years. ECOWAS wants an immediate return to democracy. How must the two parties approach this matter, looking at where we are now?
Well, first of all, for me, I think this is a big window of opportunity and relief in terms of all stakeholders who have been advocating for the use of diplomatic and non-military measures as a mode or tool for intervention in the Nigerian crisis. As you stated in this your analysis, you remember on the second day of the engagement here in Accra, we had communications, which was confirmed by Ambassador Musa, that they had communications from the junta in Niger that they were willing and ready to engage ECOWAS. And so for me, that was the initial moment of great opportunity to take advantage of that, to expand the window of diplomacy, to ensure that we avoid a military type of intervention at all costs. Now, it is clear that there is more than enough goodwill on the part of the military leaders to engage with ECOWAS. ECOWAS's own objective right now, or goal, should be about how do you work with these military leaders to ensure that we return the country back to civilian rule as soon as possible. But it has to come with a good level of goodwill and good faith from both sides to ensure that both are willing to make commitments that are in the interest of the people of Niger. I think that at the moment, ECOWAS needs to make a significant shift in terms of their posture and approach to negotiating with the military leaders. That posture is important because if you notice, since the 30th of July, the military leaders declined to meet with ECOWAS and ECOWAS's negotiation team. Yeah. And it was largely because of the lack of good faith and goodwill in dealing with that. There was some level of deficit of trust in dealing with them. Now they have made a commitment to engage with ECOWAS. ECOWAS needs to walk beyond just, the threat. And I can see that ECOWAS still makes some kind of commentary and insistence that do not, help in terms of building goodwill. I don't think that it's about insisting that they must return the country to civilian rule on a particular date. It has to be a working process of negotiation to ensure that all of them make commitments and arrive at a point that is good in the good interest of the people of Niger.
Which means ECOWAS is getting it wrong on the approach. What must they do now? Because they want a return to democracy now. The junta says 3 years. So what should they do?
It's not just ECOWAS that wants a return to democracy. Every actor, every stakeholder, including even the military leaders in the country, they recognize that the ideal and desired form of government is civilian democratic rule. And that is why they have communicated their commitment to returning the country to civilian rule. The important thing is, how do you work with these military leaders to ensure that they do so smoothly, they do so within the shortest possible time? And that should be in the interest of the people of Niger. I don't think that ECOWAS, if you notice, if you've been following ECOWAS probably in the last 4 or 5 years and how they have responded to situations, you would understand the difficulty that ECOWAS is involved in right now. ECOWAS is very challenged in terms of legitimacy, in terms of confidence from the region. People think that ECOWAS has been weak and incapable of leading as a regional body in terms of building, a foundation of goodwill, taking care of regional security matters. And so they think that is an opportunity to ensure that ECOWAS is deterrent enough, ECOWAS is effective enough in ensuring regional peace and stability as a regional leader. And so that's why you see these kinds of measures and approach that is being adopted by ECOWAS. But the danger is that you would have this kind of situation undermine the efforts, the peace process that you're looking to initiate in dealing with the coup leaders. Because if you take very, very strong positions without committing to any, reform, any kind of change, it makes it difficult for the coup leaders to want to work with you. And I think that ECOWAS needs to take a bit of a step back and engage on the basis of goodwill and good faith to ensure that they work in the interest of the people of Niger. Okay,
but is it just the ECOWAS leaders, or the junta needs to also relax a bit in its stance?
Sure, it's two-way. It's a two-way street that both have to make commitments. So first of all, we need to understand the operational objectives for the coup leaders. Why did they undertake this coup? If you go back to the June 28th speech by the coup leader 2 days after this coup took place, you would understand, the factors and the list of grievances that they have listed in this speech. It tells you they are talking about the situation of security in the country. security that has gone so bad, and that leadership at the time wasn't capable of responding to the security situation. They're talking about deterioration in terms of governance, in terms of the economy and other social factors. So this publicly forms the basis for what the coup, why the coup took place. And so if they did that, what are the objectives of their mission? We are all talking about returning the country to civilian rule. How do we ensure that we lay an infrastructure, a foundation that allows this to happen in a very smooth, very smooth manner, to ensure that we do not get back to the situation that brought us here? That involves laying a credible electoral foundation. Elections must be able to take place in an environment of peace, in an environment that is devoid of rigging and malpractices. It is not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy task. Even a country like Ghana that is known to be stable and democratic in terms of credentials, 1 year, 2 years is not a good enough time. It's not enough to lay a foundation for credible elections. And so you don't expect that to happen in Niger or any of the countries that are currently dealing with coup situations. We have to be very realistic about the timelines that we're looking at. I know that ECOWAS is insistent on this because of principle. The principle that no country within this space must be led by by military leadership. We have to ensure that principle is upheld. But you don't uphold that principle at the expense of security and at the expense of livelihood and at the expense of the entire population. As we speak now, it is not the coup leaders who are suffering. It's the people of Niger who are suffering, who are going through daily hardships. In terms of the economy, the borders are closed. They cannot transport goods out of the country. They cannot trade with their regular clients. They cannot get access to electricity and several other important social amenities they need. And it's largely because of ECOWAS's deterrent measures that they believe would have compelled the coup leaders to succumb or submit to them. And unfortunately, that is not working. So we need to take a step back and review all these processes and construct a posture that is supportive of goodwill and peace to ensure that we go through this peacefully and in the interest of the people of Niger.
Let me bring in Dr. Ishmael Robo, who is an international relations analyst. Dr. Grateful for joining us here. What do you make of the feed that was chugged over the weekend, where eventually ECOWAS had its delegation being met by the junta leadership? Dr. Robo, are you with me? I'm trying to find out from you what you do make of what happened over the weekend, where the leadership of the junta and ECOWAS met to have some deliberations of a sort over the future of Niger.
Okay, good afternoon and
for a very long time, the two parties seem to be operating from different positions. So as they now have the chance to talk, that means that we are making a headway, because talking means that every party to this dispute will now have the chance
to talk. That means that every the other and then may be able to negotiate with the other, so that their common position can be arrived at. So that's the first step to trying to avoid a situation of combat or a situation of war, which would not be helpful to the South region.
Well, from how things are, how do the two teams build on from where we are? I mean, we're all at both ends. We need to have a compromise. How do we go about it?
I've always said that the approach by ECOWAS that the military...
Yes, of course.
I think we need to, forgive me, we have to fix this challenge so that we can, come back to you. This is still the pause on the joining channel. So Mukhtar Mumini is still with me. Mukhtar, so what are your expectations from where we are now?
Well, my expectation is that we would see this as a huge opportunity for diplomacy to work over military intervention. and that we would expand that opportunity to ensure that we work with the military leaders to help them transition into a civilian rule. It doesn't help to take intransigent positions or to take positions that are undermining of goodwill in terms of negotiations. There's a reason that the coup leaders chose to meet with other stakeholders apart from ECOWAS and not ECOWAS. And it was largely because of the posture that ECOWAS constructed from the beginning, because ECOWAS came across as though, in a manner that, created an impression of a very belligerent force that is intended to go to war at all costs with Niger. And so that kind of approach must be revised and act in a way that elicits goodwill from the coup leaders to ensure that we transition the country into civilian rule. I think that all of us, at the moment, all of us were excited that this is working in the way it's working. The coup leaders are interested in dialoguing. They've talked about, a roadmap, a plan towards transitioning the country into a civilian rule. We need to take that into consideration and negotiate with them. If it can come as soon as possible, it is great, because we need to be able to get the country back into civilian rule, but on a foundation that is functional, that responds to the needs and aspirations of the people. There's a very big element that we haven't been talking about, and that is the elephant in the room. How did we get here? What brought us to this point? We haven't spoken enough about those factors. We haven't talked about the issues of good governance. We haven't talked about the pervasive culture of corruption that permeates within officialdom and the structures of governance. We haven't talked about dysfunctional institutions in these spaces that allow for these things to happen. These things are key. If we do not lay a foundation that fixes these things, we will return to coups. It doesn't matter how many times we seek to intervene. And so for me, from the beginning, as I said earlier, look, the military intervention in Niger does not mark the end of coups in West Africa or Africa. The end of coups will be marked by our capacity to respond to the needs of the people, to do what I call meeting the entitlements of citizenship and ensuring that we address issues of corruption and pervasive situations of dysfunctional institutions in all the spaces that we're looking at.
Interesting. Let me bring in Ishmael Holover now, who joins us via phone now. Doc, I'm grateful for rejoining. So I wanted to find out from you, what will be your advice to both teams? Now, the junta says, I want to return in 3 years. ECOWAS says we need it now. We all know that in negotiation, we need to meet each other halfway. So how do you expect both teams to move from where we are? I mean, to move on from where we are now.
In any negotiation, you have to always have a position to compromise. I think ECOWAS needs to compromise on having the country return to civilian rule now and having the former president reinstated. That is not possible. So perhaps having pushed the military junta to bring out a timetable, they may negotiate the way of that timetable in the sense that they have said at this point this must happen, so that we can have a measurable target along the 3-year span. What and what will be achieved within the first year, what will be achieved within the second year, and then finally within the third year when the military will return the country to civilian rule. And that can be done because ECOWAS already have sanctions in place. Then it is easy to use those sanctions as a bargain, where you say, well, if you meet this particular target that you set for the first year, this and these sanctions will be lifted. And if you meet this other one, then this and these sanctions will be lifted until we return to civilian rule. And that is the only way to go. So ECOWAS must come back and realize that the whole objective of saying that return the country immediately to civilian rule and bring back the former president is not attainable, in the sense that there are certain conditions that push them to make the coup. And of course, it is not so possible for somebody to test political power and go back to the barracks as easily as that. It's not going to work. So I think that the posture of hand over power immediately and return to the barracks have to give way to where we have a compromise. Of course, they could also push the military to shorten the time frame for return to civilian rule. Maybe from 3 years, we could look at 2 years, so that then all the achievable targets within 2 years is well documented, and then the sanctions are used as a backup to force them to return the country to civilian rule. So, of course, on both sides, there should be compromise.
I mean, over the weekend, I had the South African president speak to Joy News in South Africa, where because there's going to be the BRICS summit, he was talking about what he's going to discuss, with President Putin. How do you expect the international community to react to the latest development in Niger? I mean, with regards to ECOWAS now making headway of meeting the junta to discuss the way forward of issues.
So what happens is that once we are now talking, trying to get the diplomatic solution, what will then happen is that then the international community will respond by giving both parties the chance to try to reach a negotiated settlement. Because even it is not in the interest of neither party or even the international community to have a military solution to this crisis. So that makes the work of even the South African more easy, in the sense that when they meet Putin, it's not about discussing intervention. They may be discussing ways that Russia could also help to make sure that the process of returning to civilian rule is achieved. So the military option is no longer the sole option on the table. There are diplomatic options. Then South Africa could now discuss with Russia how Russia can be part of this process of ensuring that that country returns to civilian rule.
Why must Russia be part of the process anyway?
Of course, we are in a sub-region where major powers are trying to find their grounding. And as you can see, the coup makers seem to have some sympathy for Russia. We cannot establish yet if Russia is directly involved, but given the flags and all those things, there's the likelihood that they are connected to the coup makers somehow. So yes, in trying to find a solution, they may be involved, because if you look at it, all the Western powers seem to lean to the support of ECOWAS, and the coup makers seem to go to the Russian side. So if you are going to have a solution, these major powers have to be part of the solution, because their actions are part and parcel of the problem. If you look at the coup, France seems to be one of the subjects being raised by the coup makers. So, and they seem to reason that Russia is a better partner. So if they think that Russia is a better partner, then Russia is in a position to somehow influence them in terms of their direction.
But from what is happening, doesn't it look like, the West scrambling for Africa again?
Of course, that is already in process. We have seen, not only because of this coup, but over the years, various parties, the geopolitical competition between China, Russia on one side, and the Western world on the other side, trying to get partners through various deals, through various arrangements. So yes, we are living in a time of changing global dynamics and geopolitical competition. And once you live in this era, you must be prepared to deal with these powers, because all of them want friends, all of them want territories that are friendly to them. So that is also one of the reasons why these coups will become rampant within the region if we don't address some of the fundamental challenges. Because from the 90s, where it was a purely U.S.-dominated world, where the U.S. can push everybody into democracy, the dynamics have changed. Now you have other entrants, other major powers, other rising powers who do not necessarily care about democracy. They are interested in who is in power, who can do their bidding. So if you have this kind of dynamic, then you realize that the backing for Western democracy, at a point it was that difficult to make a coup, because all the major powers at that time were coming for democracy. Now it is quite easy, because you may find partners within the geopolitical divide. So coups have become easier to organize, and international support will be there. One of the reasons why it is so difficult to get a UN Council resolution to support ECOWAS in terms of going to Niger is because then you have Russia, you have China, who will stand by the principle that they will not interfere in the domestic affairs of another country, and therefore are likely to use their veto to block any such resolution. So yes, we are living in a time of geopolitical competition, and Africa only have to stand up to this competition and stake a claim for their own interests.
Momoni, I don't know whether you subscribe to this, that, you know, the West is scrambling for Africa. If you do, how then do you think we all should progress so that we don't hurt a lot of feelings involved here, to arrive at an amicable solution, everybody benefit, and then we move on?
Africa has never been away from the scramble in the hands of the West and other partners. Ever since the bond of 1844 and the Berlin, meeting, we've always been under these kinds of factors from external actors. And so what is happening may be an amplification of that same thing in very recent history. But we have never, ever moved away from it. Now, I mean, this world is a place of a battle. It's a battleground. And so it's either you get prepared for it or you get perished. And so the competition that exists amongst actors, it's like that. It's a competition that you need to get prepared for. Otherwise, you get victimized by it. So, I mean, if we have vulnerabilities like we have in West Africa, we will inevitably attract foreign actors. And foreign actors will be interested in, they have interest in here, and they will pursue any engagement in line with their interests. It is up to us to put our acts together in a more, stronger position to engage internationally in the interests of our countries and interests of our nations. Yes, we talk about geopolitics. We're talking about Russia here, Wagner. We're talking about the EU, the West, and even to some extent, the Gulf, states. All of them are interested in what is happening in the Sahel and in West Africa generally. And it's because of the enormous, resources, the natural resources that we have, and what it can potentially do to industrialization in those countries. Okay. Russia is looking for raw material all over the world, and they're using what they have in terms of expertise and in terms of money, finance, to be able to get that in exchange for that. Russia is using, the capacity of Wagner to restore stability, to restore security among their partners. In exchange, they get resources and they get, the support they need internationally. They leverage on that. The same way America and the West, they are selling democracy. They're selling the values of democracy and the values of good governance. How attractive is it to West Africans at the moment? Not much, because everything shows that in the last 15 years, democracy seems to be under siege in West Africa. They are less, a lot of young people are less interested in the fortunes of democracy than they are about the fortunes of engagement with Asia, especially China, and other actors that look more pragmatic when it comes to dealing with the problems that we deal with on a daily basis. And so those things, form the elements that we have to look at in conversations and discourse that will lead to how do we chart a new path of independence, not just political independence, economic independence, social independence, and all the things that resilient and sustainable nations need to build to ensure that you are insulated from foreign interests in a manner that undermines your own interests. We haven't reached that, and there isn't any indication at the moment that we are properly tooled to do that. And that's why I'm very worried about how we engage in Niger, because the way we go about it may actually undermine the security situation of the country and the entire region, or mark a new beginning of a region devoid of violence, devoid of insecurity, devoid of instability, and devoid of coups. And that is not what we are seeing at the moment. Very interesting thought here, which means that there's a broader, picture that we all need to look at. But is it not dangerous that it looks as though we are playing into the hands of all of these superpowers who are scrambling for the resources of Africa? If that is it, how must ECOWAS use Niger's case as a test case to try and wean ourselves from the influence of the superpowers? You're right. We are not tooled at the moment to, in practice, wean ourselves of the foreign influence that we see. We are not properly tooled at the moment. Economically, we are at the mercy of Western partners and partners from Asia. Look at the state of our economies all over here. We are in a very poor state when it comes to our ability to fund the key initiatives that we need to build in terms of building an infrastructure for developed and sustainable, countries. We don't have that. When it comes to the institutions, we don't have that. We have run down institutions and we continue, to engage in antics that further deteriorate our situation. Recently, you hear of the government looking for, funding to develop, something that relates to public service protocols or something like that by the Bank of Ghana. Things like that are ridiculous.
Going to the IMF to seek for funding to draw up the public, ethics to govern public service.
Exactly. This is not something we should be talking about right now, let alone go for funding to do that. This is ridiculous. For a 40-year democracy, 30-year democracy that is seen as an example for a region. And so these things, it should worry all of us. If we look at the entire sub-region, the security situation is in a mess. In fact, and I speak from the point of security and violent extremism where I work. 2015-2014 was the peak of terrorist violence globally. And in fact, that period was the deadliest year for terrorism in West Africa. So West Africa, in effect, was leading globally in terms of fatality. So it was the deadliest region. And we're looking at numbers at around 7,000, 7,500 people in terms of fatalities. Today, as the first 6 months of this year, we recorded over 4,600 fatalities. It tells you that by the end of the year, we would surpass the numbers that we recorded in 2014, 2015. We have over 1,800 attacks. It tells you that by the end of this year would be the deadliest year for terrorism globally since September 11th. And that epicenter of violence is in West Africa. Wow. A situation like that tells us that we are not in any position at all to contain the terrorist violence that we are looking at. And if you cannot contain security within your space, then you have no capacity to sustain any gains that you make. There's a Roman philosopher or statesman who talks about security in the state, and that the highest law of the land is the security and protection and livelihoods of the people. If you cannot guarantee security, you cannot guarantee anything. That's why I'm worried about the fact that, we are not in any capacity, in a position to gain, talk about independence, political or economic independence. Because even the basic things, we have shown incapacity to deal with them. And it's up to our leaders now to take a break and ensure that we build a sustainable foundation for these things to take off. Other than that, we're in a bad state.
Very scary picture you paint there. So if you look at it, how do you expect what is happening in Niger to end?
Well, I think that if I were part of ECOWAS as a team, I would see this as a big opportunity now. It saves us a lot of fatigue. It saves us a lot of resources and time because the coup guys are willing to engage now. And from a strategic point of view, I may not take off the military option away completely at the moment because it could still be used as a strategic tool for negotiations. But I would be very mindful of the language you use in dealing and communicating with them. It must be in the tone that is supportive of a process that is built around a common cause. And that common cause is to build an infrastructure and a foundation to return the country to civilian rule. Already, and luckily, Ambassador Musa had already mentioned, they are not against Niger. They are not against the people of Niger. They are actually acting in the interest of the people of Niger. So in that spirit, the way you engage with the military leaders must reflect that reality and that understanding and ensure that they work together as a team. In spite of what must have happened in July 26th, we need to take into consideration the larger interests of the people of Niger and ensure that we return the country back to civilian rule, rather than seeking to project ECOWAS as, some authoritarian regional big power player that is capable of restoring order and security in this space.
Dr. Horovo, from what Momoni has said, it means that geopolitically we are not independent as a continent. Talk less of a sub-region, which means that we may probably have to rely on Russia, which is of course the darling of the junta, to then take us through. Shouldn't that be our option?
Of course, as I said. We also need to engage all those external forces that we think have an influence in this situation. because their interest is at play. So if we don't engage them, the solution will not come the way we want to. So yes, geopolitically, the South region has really not been independent. Leaders come and play to one of the several major powers at any given point in time. So we must observe carefully. France's interest is there. Russia's interest has entered the terrain. So all these powers, you must engage them and get a solution that brings virtually everybody on board to ensure that we achieve a certain balance. That is very important, because without achieving that balance, the solution you may come out with may be unacceptable to one side.
Oh, very, very interesting here. Now, once ECOWAS has gone in there and they've had some sort of discussion, we can bring in Russia to also play a role. Do we have to leave that to South Africa to lead it now that they are in that partnership with Russia in BRICS, or ECOWAS should still go ahead and front it?
Well, South Africa is still part of Africa, the larger African Union. So if they think that they have the relation between South Africa and Russia, if they think they can leverage on that relation and get Russia to act in a more responsible way to support a process of returning this civilian rule, then they should be able to do that. You see, more importantly, it's about how we are addressing this issue and the underlying costs. If we don't deal with those ones, we may handle this one and another one will crop up. Because we look at it, if ECOWAS can mobilize forces within the period that they are asking, bring all the military chiefs together to draw a plan to intervene, to restore civilian rule in Niger, what prevents ECOWAS from bringing these military chiefs together to put up a force to deal with the terrorist menace within the Sahel? So you see that it's as if we are just interested in maintaining elected leaders. I will not. Some of these elected leaders do not actually operate what we call democracy. In fact, they only win elections, and that seems to be all they know. So you win elections, whatever means you used to win it, doesn't really matter. Once you are elected, then it becomes like a blank check to do whatever you want. Now, if you look at the military option and all the things that they are doing, they seem not to be thinking about the wider group of the region. Because if it is about the interest of the people of West Africa, the first thing we should be concerned with is the terrorist menace. So ECOWAS chiefs, ECOWAS countries, to put the troops there, to be able to deal with it. If you don't put your troops there to deal with it, and then an elected leader is disposed, then you say that's when you put troops there. That means you are not dealing with the fundamentals of the issue, the insecurity, the other issues. If you allow leaders in the sub-region to remove the term limit and go scot-free, which is more or less constitutional coup, and don't say anything, and then military people intervene, and you say that this one will not be accepted, then you are not actually dealing with the roots. So yes, of course, we can have a solution, but the solution to Niger will not end the coup in West Africa. We must begin to deal with the underlying causes. What are the underlying causes? That when our leaders win elections, they virtually interpret the mandate to mean that it is a blank check to do whatever policy they want to pursue. And if you look at the economies of these nations that are preparing to go to war, they are struggling. The question is, how are you going to finance war when your economy are struggling? Are you taxing your citizens who are suffering to go and finance war? So you are also virtually committing the same blunder that is leading to the coup. So the option they have pursued from the beginning would rather reinforce the reason for the coup, not dealing with the causes of the coup. So yes, whatever solution we pursue, whatever angle we take it from, we must deal with the fundamental causes, the issue of youth unemployment, the issue of backsliding democracies, where people are tinkering with the very principles enshrined in the Constitution to protect them. Some of them remove people who the Constitution guarantee their appointment and put other people that just to do their body. If you run democracy like this, you run at the risk of ultimate coup d'etat. So if we don't deal with some of these issues, no matter how we engage the outside world, these issues permit them to kind of penetrate the system and do what they want to do. You are able to do what the citizens expect you to do, and they are happy with you. it is so difficult for the military to take the coup and get a support. They are only able to get support within the situation of the current leadership crisis we are facing with the sub-region, where leaders are very pursuing policies that enrich themselves and impoverish the rest of the population.
Should, you know, a reenactment of the Niger Constitution be one of the, you know, strategies to get the junta to agree to probably hand over power? Is it something that could work magic?
Of course, the junta has already considered that, yes, they will return to civilian rule. And ultimately, while the constitution has been abrogated, I would think that they will not return to civilian rule on the same constitution. Because that constitution will contain provisions that prohibit anybody from overthrowing the constitution in the first place. So there will be a process of trying to get a new constitution in place, which may somehow reflect some of the concerns of the South. So ECOWAS must be interested in what is the nature of that constitution. What are the guarantees the constitution offer for office holders that are critical? For instance, the electoral commission, the justices, all those critical. So those are the dynamics, those critical provisions that will guarantee the democracy. And more importantly, you must be interested in how the constitution is functioning in a way that allows the citizens to exercise a lot of control over leadership.
Now, I'm reading from the ISS and their report on how to deal with coups. One of the things they state is that since the surge in coups in 2021, successive PSC chairs, including Ghana and the Gambia, have persisted in tabling the issue for discussion. The need for a lead state or champion in this conversation cannot be overemphasized. As has become clear over the years, the AU is more robust when it comes when its capable member states champion particular issues in the context of collective continental commitment. So what they are asking for is a state to lead all of these discussions to get us out of where we are. Is that how you think we should go about it, for one state to be the champion lead in all of these discussions?
You see, in sometimes you need a country that will act a little bit as a hegemon within the region in order to have that influence over all the other parties. Yeah, that's an option that can be pursued. But then that option then raises the question, which of these countries in West Africa? Is it Nigeria? Is it Ghana? Is it Cote d'Ivoire? Now, in terms of democratic virtues, in terms of democratic institutions, Ghana seems to be more credible than the others. Because if you look at Nigeria, some of the democratic institutions are not as robust as Ghana. For example, if you look at the election that brought their current president to power, it's quite controversial and questionable. So if you have him as the lead, then somebody will begin to question what is the democratic credentials of this man to lead this process. And then again, so in terms of having Ghana, yes, we may be able to play the role, but then we will need a lot of resources to push others around to do what we are doing. Nigeria seems to be bigger, it seems to have the military crowd, it seems to have a lot, but then their own democratic institutions are not that robust. If you look at how they dealt with issues of demonstrations and protests, if you look at even their own ability to maintain security within Nigeria, dealing with the Boko Haram menace, that should tell you that they themselves may not be the best bet to lead this process. So the question with that approach is then, who then leads the process? Because the person might have a well-without in terms of the democratic trapping, in terms of a robust economy, that will permit you to then focus on addressing some of these international issues. But currently, we don't have, within West Africa, we don't have that outstanding democracy with the resources and the mind to influence others. If we say Cote d'Ivoire have gone through a process where virtually they were tinkering with their own constitution. So they all have their own baggages that they are carrying. So that approach, well, it is one of the ways to go. May be difficult within the current circumstances. As you see, it may be South Africa. But then South Africa is so it's within the broader African context. It may not be able to have that level of influence it may have if it is in the SADC region in West Africa. So among the three countries, Senegal, you look at Senegal itself, the democratic credentials are going down. So they are not able to stand up to push others to democratic rule. I think that the best representative in West Africa is Ghana. But then again, will our economy situation allow us to play such a role?
Like Nkrumah did some time ago when countries were seeking for their independence. Now, the U.S. Institute for Peace is also enumerating certain things. And I come to you, Mumuni, here. It says that some U.S.-based analysts have proposed that we should allow democracy to lead in us stemming the tide in these coups. Now, they've said make democracy a greater priority with a more consistent, coordinated strategy and programs. They've said buttress the pro-democracy mechanisms of regional groupings such as the ECOWAS and the African Union, both in preventing coups and in responding when they take place. Build better transitions to democracy. But it is the same democracy that has brought us here. So how do we build on this to give assurance that it is the way to go? Do you ever foresee the junta, relaxing in their demands, as in restoring democracy in 3 years?
Well, democracy, of course, we'll all come to agree to accept that democracy is the worst form of government, but it is the best among the existing forms of government. What it means is that it is not a given. For democracy to work here, we have to be very deliberate and intentional about the way we raise leaders. Leaders who are human rights compliant, leaders who are effective and functional in responding to the needs of the people. Democracy should be about people, not about power. And we have seen it across the entire African space in the last half century. We have been incapable of sustaining democracy. And it's largely because the factors that the foundation on which we build democracy is a very, very weak one. For instance, we would continue to have instability. We would continue to have coup kind of situations and insecurity and instability if the focus of leadership, the leadership that we put in place to manage the affairs of our countries, if their focus is on power and not on the people. Because in all cases, democracy should be about the people and their needs and aspirations. How do you build a foundation and an infrastructure that responds to the needs and aspirations of the people? So, for instance, where I work in security and preventing violent extremism, we have come to appreciate that it appears that terrorist groups seem to understand young people better than the street. They are able to understand the frustrations, the vulnerabilities around young people, their aspirations, and they are able to meet these aspirations. And so they have very loyal and dedicated followers who are ready to take up a gun and a motorbike, $100, and they are committed to do the job. Our governments are actually on the way. They are in the way of young people instead of leading them and providing infrastructure for them. If we look at the entire West African space, we truly understand what democracy is about in terms of the theoretical understanding of what it is. And we do not have that culture that we need, the very deliberate foundation that we need to build to sustain democracy. And that's why you see countries, they move 2-3 steps and they move 2 steps back. Look at the case of Niger. Niger, experienced something that everybody was very excited about, including international players, the United States, the EU. Everyone was excited about the progress Niger was making. Because for the first time, they had transitioned from a democratic rule, civilian rule, to another civilian rule. This same president that, has been affected by this coup, President Bazoum, just the day before, 2 days before he was meant to be sworn in, there was a coup attempt. And so it tells you that the country has always been very vulnerable to coup situations. It's part of the modest gains they were making in terms of democracy. Democracy exists, but it's not sustainable. We are unable to sustain it because we are not intentional about the way we groom leaders to lead these countries. And if you look at what happened in Guinea, The same way, the Guinean situation is a situation that, I can characterize as individuals who were angered by the pervasive situation of plunder and fakery in public office. Because these are people who surround the president. They see what goes on every single day in the presidency, around the president, of the cameras. The impunity with which they live can anger these guys to take the coup decisions that they have taken.
Okay.
And if you notice, have you seen in all the 4 situations, nearly all of them are not the regular military guys. These are guys who are presidential guards, who are around the president day and night, and they see what the president does off camera, on camera, the plunder, the fakery, the corruption, the impunity that comes with public office and politics. That can anger any human being who will humane enough to respond to the people. Because these guys see in the open how people struggle on a daily basis, and yet there's too much waste going on. And they are encouraged by the human spirit to undertake a coup. And that's why we're seeing that happen. And so for us to prevent the spate of coup, to stop the spate of coups from happening, we need to build an infrastructure that is very deliberate about how to sustain democracy. The issues of good governance, human rights issues. How do you respond to the needs of the people? That's what I call the entitlements of citizenship.
Okay.
That is what can help stop this spate of coups.
Okay. But I wanted to find out from you, and if you can do this for me in a minute, do you foresee the junta leadership, relaxing in their demand of returning democracy, returning the country to democracy in the next 3 years? Do you foresee them doing that?
Well, if you listen to conversations, if you have contacts in there, you speak to people around, around leadership, these are guys who are not, they have been encouraged by the developments in the country to do what they have done. And I believe that they would go through, that they will do the promise to transition the country to civilian rule within 3 years. I don't think that they would renege on that promise. But more importantly, it's not about them. It's not just about the coup leaders. It's about everyone. It's about the citizens and ECOWAS and other stakeholders. So we will have to work together with them to ensure that we transition the country back to civilian rule.
All right. Grateful to you, Mukhtar, for joining us. Dr. Hlovo, before I let you go, your final words on how to deal with the Nigeria situation. Okay. I think we've lost Dr. Hlovo there, but you're still watching the Pulse here on the Joy News channel. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back, and we'll be taking you straight to South Africa, where the BRICS Summit will be happening. Stay with us.